Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just, it's setting up on Facebook Live in 3, 2, 1, hopefully. Okay. Shalom, everybody. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have with us today Nadia Matar from Women in Green and the Sovereignty Movement. Thank you for joining us today, Nadia.
Shalom, Rabbi Tuly.
So you have been in the news, all over the news, because of your, first of all, for those who might not know you yet, you have been a pioneer and a leading force in the sovereignty movement for many, many years, many, many years. And now is your moment. All of your dreams are coming true. Sovereignty is what everybody is talking about, yet you are now in the news for having opposition or concerns about what's happening. So you want to explain to us some of the background and what's going on right now?
Shalom to everybody. Shalom, Rabbi Weisz. Yes, indeed. The Sovereignty Movement was founded in 2011 by the Women in Green. As you know, Women in Green was founded in 1993 to oppose the Oslo agreements, basically saying the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. God gave us this land, and we have no right to give it because it belongs to the past and future generations. Very simple message. And that is why we oppose the Oslo agreements. And then for many years, we've been saying no to a Palestinian state, no to give them weapons, no to release murderers, no. But you can't go around life saying only no. I had the privilege of meeting during the disengagement, and we tried to prevent the disengagement of Gush Katif in 2005. I had the privilege of meeting one of the icons and pioneers and heroes of the renewed Jewish settlement in Hebron. Her name is Judith Katzover, who joined the Women in Green in 2005. And we continued our battle differently, not with demonstrations, but with holding on to the land, seeing that the Palestinian Authority is taking over illegally all kind of areas in Area C. And we thought that that would be the battle. And then in 2011, we realized that that's not enough. It's not enough to just plant trees and try to safeguard another hill. There's a problem with the national camp. We always say no. What is our yes? What do we want? And that is when in 2011, we raised the flag of the sovereignty movement. We weren't the first ones to do it. We have other people before us. If it's Uri Elitzur of blessed memory, or may she have a long life, Caroline Glick and Yoram Ettinger, and many others wrote about it. But Judith Katzover decided that we need to turn it into a movement, to only focus on that, to raise that flag. And we asked permission of all those others that I just mentioned. Is it okay if we turned it into a movement? And we basically started promoting the application of Israeli sovereignty, unlike annexation, which we'll discuss later, over Judea and Samaria as the plan of the national camp to finish the 6-day war. We won the 6-day war physically. We returned physically to those areas, but the state of Israel never decided what to do with those areas. There was this kind of stuttering. What do we do? And instead of doing what they should have done on the 7th day of the victory, which is applying Israeli sovereignty and including all those areas as part of the state of Israel, and there would have been no trouble today. We wouldn't have been talking today. It would have been part of Israel. Unfortunately, that wasn't done, and it was the pioneers who promoted that we should return and create Jewish communities. So we have 500,000 Jews who came and live here, but still under military rule, under civil administration, with a big question mark over those areas. And that is why the world started saying, you are maybe occupiers. If you don't claim it's yours, then you must be occupiers. And therefore, we have to once and for all finish the 6-day war by applying sovereignty. And the sovereignty movement is an ideological movement. We raise the flag that says God gave us this land, the land of Israel, to the Jewish people, and we have no right to give it away. And we applauded President Trump and his administration when they started talking about the fact that this is our land and that the Jewish communities are legal. It was a revolution. President Trump and his administration made a revolution with their statements. And therefore came the other shock. And when we started reading the Trump plan, which is in blatant contradiction to those incredible words. When President Trump said those very brave words that this land belongs to Jewish people and the Jewish communities are legal, President Trump didn't do a favor. That doesn't work. That's not how it works. Presidents in every country do what is good for their country. And they didn't do Israel or the Jewish people a favor. President Trump did what he does all the time. He's a courageous man who stands on the side of justice and truth. And he said the truth. That's all. That's what he did. And we were so proud that finally there is in America somebody who's not afraid to say the truth. And therefore, our shock and disbelief when we read the agreement in total contradiction to those truthful words. And I have here with me the quote. I just want to, if you allow me, Rabbi, to say just one quote. The entire premise of the Trump plan, of the deal of the century. First of all, one doesn't make deals in one country, but the premise, that is what we have a problem with. And that's where I'll finish my first answer. It says here, legitimate aspirations of the parties. While the Palestinians have never had a state, they have a legitimate desire to rule themselves and chart their own destiny. Any peace agreement must address the Palestinians' legitimate desire for self-determination. This vision addresses these legitimate concerns through, among other things, the designation of territory for a future Palestinian state, strengthening Palestinian institutions of self-government, providing Palestinians with a legal status and international standing of a state, ensuring and building, etc., etc., etc. Meaning the premise is there are two peoples here who both deserve a land and self-determination, and we completely oppose this. There's the Jewish people who's 3,300 years old, and this land was given to them by God. And you have here illegal invaders who came less than 100 years ago, called themselves a so-called people, and we are on the same status? That is our main problem with the Trump plan. And then, of course, afterwards, everything that comes because of this statement, giving them, it belongs to us 100%, and we're supposed to give them 70%, those people who this land doesn't belong to them. We're supposed to turn Jewish communities into enclaves. We're supposed to divide Jerusalem. We're supposed to give, according to this vision of the deal of the century, large chunks of the Negev to this new Palestinian state. And I'm finishing my answer by saying the following. We're in disbelief. We understood that the Republican platform had been overturned by our dear friend Alan Clements, among many other people, and the Palestinian state, which is a danger not only to Israel, but also to America and to Western civilization, and which the overwhelming majority of the Jewish people oppose. And I'll tell you a secret, the majority of the Arabs don't want a Palestinian state. And we'll talk about that later, we have Arabs in our sovereignty movement who say, Nadia, do everything to have sovereignty because I prefer to be a resident under Israeli sovereignty rather than a citizen in a Palestinian corrupt state. We'll talk about that too. So we're asking, how come this brave President Trump, who is the one who phrased this agreement? Because I believe that President Trump, I believe him when he said at the beginning, I don't care if it's a two-state, one-state, whatever the Israeli people want. Who overturned this idea and who used our sovereignty, our beautiful sovereignty and our pure sovereignty, and which is the Zionist vision, who used this as a wrapping for the poison called the Palestinian state? Because if you read that agreement, 99% of this whole vision is how to create a Palestinian state. And how come you're doing that damage? And that's my question. Of course, there's many more quotes I can quote you. I call upon everybody to read the deal of the century and understand its terrible dangers, not only to Israel, but to America and Western civilization. And we hope that will be overturned.
Now, we've interviewed other people, including the mayor of Efrat, and he also has concerns about the Palestinian state. It would be right around his city, right on the, Bethlehem is right on the outskirts of his city, Efrat. And he also is concerned, but he believes that we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to gain sovereignty. And he's not so concerned that the Palestinians will actually go through all of the hoops and loops to get their statehood. Obviously, I'm sure you've discussed that with him. You came to a different conclusion, but you also said that, that you're not all about saying no, you're about saying yes. So what do you propose?
Okay, so your question is divided in two. I'll answer first the second part. What we do propose is that our prime minister should receive the courage that Levi Eshkol, Menachem Begin, and even Olmert, who we have many disagreements with, but did one thing at least that was correct, was to do things that is in Israel's best interest, even if our dear friends in America at that moment don't agree. What we are calling upon the prime minister, and we're starting a vigil, a 3-day, we call it reserve duty on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, this coming week, with that message across the prime minister's office, apply sovereignty with no linkage to any Palestinian state or to the Trump deal. Levi Eshkol did it, and the Americans were upset, and the sky didn't fall. And Menachem Begin did it with the Golan, and the sky didn't fall. And Ehud Olmert bombed the Iraqi things with the incredible opposition of America. But afterwards, we heard that the Americans said, we respect somebody who decides for his own country. That is what we're calling upon. That's our message. We're not saying no to sovereignty. We're saying yes to sovereignty with no linkage to the Trump deal. That's number one. Now, to go back to, yes, there is a big differences of opinion in the right-wing camp. There, maybe we can call it the pragmatist versus the ideologues. Even though I think that even the pragmatists, I don't know if it's pragmatic. Indeed, you quoted Oded Elvivi, and there's a few other people who are telling us, Nadia, Judith, what do you care? All we have to do is to agree to discuss the 70% giving to the Arabs, etc. But there's so many conditions that the Arabs have to answer. So what do you care? Get first the sovereignty, and then we'll worry about it, because the Arabs anyway will never accept. Three things about. Probably from an ideological point of view, I cannot even agree to discuss giving away parts of my homeland, because no deals can be made on the land of Israel. Number two, having your faith in the fact that the Arabs never, what's the sentence? Never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's not true. We see that Sadat came and we gave away incredibly all that land to him. And Yasser Arafat signed that document, which is not worth the ink he used, but he signed it. He received A and B, he received an army. So don't tell us that the Arabs sometimes don't sit down. So that is the other answer to our dear friends who the pragmatists. And thirdly, let's say that the Arabs do not agree because of all those conditions. Those conditions have been put by President Trump and the Trump administration. So Yoram Ettinger always explains it very clearly. First of all, a president can overturn his own positions. He can say at this moment, in a couple of months, years, those conditions are no more valid and the Palestinians will get what they want without those conditions. Or, God forbid, we will not have no more President Trump, and we all want President Trump to win. But one day there will be the after Trump era. Let's hope it's going to be only in 4 years. But the after Trump era, they can say, you agree to those conditions, 70% to the Palestinians, you already agreed to that. And we do not want to put any more conditions to the Arabs. And what do we do then? That is our main difference of opinion with our pragmatic friends. And the last thing is they're trying to say, we are like Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion agreed to 30%. He agreed to a few percent, and he didn't take everything. So my answer to that is not true. Ben Gurion agreed to take a little less, but he had nothing in his hands. He had nothing, and he took a little bit, and he made it very clear, we want everything. And he, in fact, continued the war. He went to the Lamethé, etc. Today, we have all of Judea and Samaria in our hands. We have everything in our hands. We just don't have sovereignty over it, but it's in our hands, even A and B. And to give away and to only take a part of it is not being Ben Gurion, it's being Yossi Beilin. Those people who say take only a little and agree to discuss the rest, they're not Ben Gurion, they're Yossi Beilin, like with the Oslo agreements. And let's make it clear, the map of the Trump plan is worse than the Oslo map. That's my answer.
Okay. So we are here with Nadia Matar from Women in Green and the Sovereignty Movement. And I have just 2 more questions for you, Nadia. And you've been so articulate until now, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. There's been a lot in the news recently about how Trump is pushing annexation because he's concerned about the elections in November, and he believes that he needs to shore up support from his evangelical voters. And therefore, he's pushing for annexation because of the evangelicals. And Israel is about to do something that many Israelis don't want to do. Certainly, most Jews around the world don't want to do, but it's important to the evangelicals. That's what's going on, and that's what the news is saying. What do you have to say about that? Do you agree with that premise?
First of all, I don't agree with the word annexation, and there's a very big difference. People have to understand that annexation is not what is on the table. Annexation means that you take land that from another country that's not yours, etc. It is used by people who oppose our being in Israel at all. So don't use the word annexation. If you're a friend of Israel, you use the word application of Israeli sovereignty, and that is what is on the table. That's what we want to do,
That was my
President
second
Trump.
question.
Okay. So it's so I already
Sovereignty
answered
versus annexation. So okay, so thank you. We'll do that.
about the Christians, about the evangelicals. To answer your question, shall I answer your question?
Yeah.
Definitely, I'm sure that the evangelicals who believe in the Tanakh want their president to do what God wants to happen, which is that the Jewish people should be in their homeland as a sovereign people. And that's why the person who wrote the Trump deal put President Trump into trouble. Some people even say that our own prime minister was involved in this. And he put the president into trouble, because how can the evangelicals agree to this Trump deal if we're talking about giving away part of the homeland? And what we call upon the evangelical world is convince your president that indeed, if he wants to win the elections, and we all want him to win the elections, that he should do what God has asked, to give this land to the Jewish people, not to any other foreign entity. And I will tell you, I will not mention names, but we met with two congressmen in Oswego in Israel, when we're the place that we set up in memory of the three boys. And we asked them, how can it be? It was very soon after the famous signing in Washington. What is going on here? How come? And also in the Republican platform, the Palestinian state has been abolished. And all of a sudden we're talking about a Palestinian state. This whole Trump deal is basically, its purpose is the creation of a Palestinian state and wrapping it in sovereignty, pretend sovereignty. And they said, we're embarrassed. We don't know. We don't know what's going on. And therefore, we call upon the evangelical world, convince your president to dismiss this plan and to go for the real plan, sovereignty of the Jewish people, and it will bring stability and real peace for Jews and Arabs alike, because that's what the majority of the Arabs also want.
Now, other people are saying that, in fact, there was an article in the Jerusalem Post just yesterday by a Christian leader that, in fact, sovereignty is not an important issue to the evangelicals, because right now they're very focused on internal American issues, COVID-19 and the unrest from the George Floyd riots and the protests that are happening, and the economy that's in free fall in the United States, and that sovereignty is not on the agenda. Most Christians don't even really appreciate the issue, don't understand the nuances that you're describing. Yet, obviously, you are in touch with certain Christians and so tell us about, from your perspective, how do the Christian pro-Israel evangelicals feel about this issue, and what are they currently doing to be involved with the sovereignty movement?
Well, first of all, this is really a time to grieve with our American friends about what is going on by you, and those who suffered from, God forbid, from the COVID or from the terrorist Black Lives Matters, pogroms, etc. We're with you, and be strong and don't give in to terror, which it is. And about your question, obviously, I assume that we do not know all the evangelical leaders, the people we are in touch with. For instance, we have this amazing Reverend Anthony Abma, who has created this organization called, the name escaped, the proper name escaped, maybe you remember, Sovereignty, wow, I have a blackout, but Anthony Abma with the Sovereignty Movement. It's not a Sovereignty Movement, he has a specific name, I apologize. Anthony, if you're listening, maybe you can look it up, Rabbi Weisz.
Okay. I'll get it for you.
Wow, this is called the senior moment. Anyway, he created a sovereignty movement by Bible-believing Christians and that is their message, and they're going forward with this, and we believe that he is in touch, and he told us.
Return, O Israel. Return, O Israel.
Return, O Israel. Oh my God. Okay, thank you. Return, O Israel by Anthony Abma, and he. I suggest you basically interview him, because he knows much more than we do about the situation in the Christian world and how it's divided. So sometimes I also have to say that I don't know the complete answer to that. I know that we're in touch with quite a few people. How many people do they represent? Interview Anthony Abma, I suggest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now finally, so we touched upon the language, a difference between annexation and sovereignty. And so you did explain, but why is it important to, to call it sovereignty, and not to, the whole world is referring to it as annexation. People might not even know what you're talking about when you refer to it as sovereignty, but why do you insist on the language of sovereignty?
The whole world is calling us occupiers, so I'm going to call myself occupier. I'm here, a resident of Eretz Israel, a Jew, a proud Jew of Eretz Israel, where if you already have to translate the word in Hebrew, settler, is really the inheritors of the land. So I have to go around according to what the world does? Never. And we go according to the truth and the justice. And truth and justice is that it's called application of sovereignty. I'm talking about now the truth on a legal basis. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I suggest you interview lawyer attorney Alan Baker, who will give you a 50-minute lecture on exactly the legal terminology of why what is going on in Judea and Samaria is not annexation. And annexation is used by those who are not friends of Israel. So those who are friends of Israel, and by mistake you use that word, it is the wrong word, the application of Israeli sovereignty. We're calling upon our own prime minister to be a sovereign leader and do what is best for Israel. And we know that also the President Trump will, in the end, he already agreed that this land is ours. He already knows that the Jewish communities are legal. So do not come up with a plan that will choke the communities, because our plan is to bring here another 1 million Jews. Our plan, our sovereignty movement, we made a national outline plan. How will it look when there will be Israeli sovereignty from the sea to the Jordan on all of Judea and Samaria? We're going to build many, many new Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. We're going to bring another 2 million Jews here. We're going to have a wonderful life of stability. We are not going to agree to a Palestinian state, not even in principle, because a Palestinian state is something the majority of the Jewish people oppose, is something that is bad for America's interest and Israel's interest, and it is something that the Arabs do not want. So please, our message is very simple. Yes to sovereignty over the land of Israel, never to Palestine.
Well, then I gotta ask you, because you talk about how the Arabs themselves are not in favor of Palestinian statehood, but right now there's a lot of movement by the Gulf states to prevent Israel from moving forward with the Trump peace plan. And so it seems like that the Arab world, it seems to be certainly against sovereignty. But you're saying that there are Arabs who are in support and in favor.
I'm saying don't believe anything they say in the news, because whatever is said in the news is not what really goes on. For instance, people on the left are trying to say that Jordan is against sovereignty, which is a complete lie. Jordan, their worst nightmare is the creation of a Palestinian state, which will endanger Jordan. And we know from inside, from behind the scenes, that the Jordanian leadership is begging for Israel to have sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and not the Palestinian state. Now, about the Arabs in Israel. As you know, the Oslo agreements, their first crime, before it was the crime of simply giving away our land, this first crime was against the Arabs. The Oslo agreements basically brought terrorists from abroad and forced it as leaders upon the local Arab population. I will never forget our neighbor here in Wadi Nis, Walid, who saw me during the 90s, in the beginning of the Oslo agreement, demonstrating against the Oslo agreements. And he told me, Nadia, be successful, because with your demonstrations against Oslo, because if you're not successful, my village here next to Efrat will become Area B, and who knows what's going to be. And of course, we weren't successful, and unfortunately, his village became Area B. So when you talk about the Arabs in Israel, you have in Judea and Samaria, you have the local Arabs who are very scared to talk. And you have the Palestinian Authority. Of course, the Palestinian Authority says they're against sovereignty, but they don't represent the people. They do not represent, they're corrupt, murderous people who first, before they murder Jews, they murder their own people who dare to oppose them. So the first thing one should do when we apply sovereignty is to dismantle the Palestinian Authority and talk to the local leaders here who want Israeli sovereignty, to respect Islam by giving them some kind of rule by chamulot. Chamulot is tribes. That is what they want. They don't want a state. They want to be able to be with their own chamula, with their own leaders. Nobody knows that an Arab from Jenin is not going to marry an Arab from Hebron or Bethlehem because they stay in their tribes. So to answer your question, the PA, of course, are terrorists. They're no different than the Hamas, and they are going to say one thing and do not believe them. And the majority of the local Arab population despises them. Just interview Bassem Eid. Bassem Eid will say it, and he is not afraid to talk against the Palestinian Authority, and he represents the majority of the Arabs here. And as I said and repeat, he said it. We don't want citizenship. We understand the Jews cannot give us citizenship. 1.8 million Arabs cannot receive citizenship, but we don't want citizenship. We want residency, and that's enough for us, because residency under Israeli rule is much, much better life than citizenship in a terrorist Palestinian corrupt state. So about the local Arabs. And about the world, the Arab countries, they're doing what is best for their money, etc. And we believe that if Israel is strong and respects itself and says to the world once and for all, we are here, there's never going to be a Palestinian state, they're going to accept that. There's a very famous, with that I'll finish my answer. They keep on saying that the Arabs do terror because of despair. Because of despair, they do terror. It's exactly the opposite. It's because of hope. As long as the Arab terrorists have hope that they can take away our land, there will be terror. Once and for all, that we crush that hope, and we make it clear that here there's going to be Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And for our listeners in America, we're talking here about Israel with Judea and Samaria that's smaller than the state of New Jersey. That's what we're talking about, okay? And without Judea and Samaria, we're half that size. Israel with Judea and Samaria, sovereign as one state for one people. Our dream and our vision is sovereignty over the entire land with an overwhelming Jewish majority and with a non-Jewish minority loyal to the state of Israel. It's feasible, we can do it, and we will, please God.
Nadia Matar, thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to conclude with maybe a lesson from the Bible, from the Tanakh. You mentioned the Tanakh and the Bible more than once in our conversation. You talked about how the whole movement was built on the Bible. So last week in the synagogues all over the world, we read from the Torah portion of Shalach, Parshat Shalach, where a majority did not favor entering the land. However, two brave spies, two brave leaders of the Jewish people, Yehoshua ben Nun, Joshua, and Kalev ben Yefuneh, they said, Tova haaretz me'od me'od. Now you and Yehudit and everybody, Anthony and Rivka, his wife, everybody who you're describing, seemed to me like Yehoshua and like Kalev, who are saying Tova haaretz me'od me'od. And so thank you for what you're doing, first of all. But how do you apply the lessons from the Torah portion to the work that you're doing?
The lesson is very simple. First of all, nobody remembers the name of the 10 others because the only two that make an impact on history is those two, Kalev and Yehoshua. And their strength was from where? From Hebron. They say that Hebron gave them the koach. When Kalev went to Hebron, that's when he received the koach, the strength of staying loyal to the land of Israel. Mm. I have the incredible privilege of working with Judith Katzaver, who is from Hebron, who's one of the 13 women who were in Bet Hadassah as one of the renewed Jewish settlements. And I have the privilege of driving almost every day to Hebron to pick her up, to work with her. And it's this Hebron that gives us, and Hashem, and God gives us through Hebron, the strength. Whenever we go, Judith and I, to anything that we do, we go to Marat HaMachpelah, to the Machpelah cave, to the tomb of the patriarchs, to receive the strength from our forefathers, from Kalev ben Yefuneh, Yehoshua ben Nun, and from God, that said very clearly, this land, this entire land, was given to the Jewish people for an eternal, for eternity, and it is our job to keep this word. Sometimes we're a minority. When we were in 2011, nobody spoke about sovereignty. Thanks to our many partners, and again, we're not alone, but we are many partners and our donors and our friends, etc., etc. All together, we turned the minority into a majority, and I believe we'll do the same now with this deal of the century. One thing is for sure: nobody does deals about their homeland. This is our land, like our children. Not like nobody, no mother would give up 4 children in order to safeguard the health of only 2 of her 6 children. Like that, we're not going to give up even 1 inch of our homeland. It is all ours for the stability and the peace of the region. That is the best way to go. Thank you for your incredible work, Rabbi, and thank you to all the listeners.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. Have